Her answer to his prayer, I literally cribbed from the Wikipedia article for the non-committal answer that you get from a Magic 8 Ball. Hello and welcome to House of Bards. This is the podcast where normally you would hear my co-host Beth and I talking about the shared narrative style of playing role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing. And indeed, that was the intention this episode also. But unfortunately, Beth has had some technical problems and has had to bow out again. So it's going to be me once again talking to a guest, and it's not Maxie this time, although you may have heard us mention this guest at times in the past. This is Matt, everybody.
Hello.
I think we mentioned you like a couple of times, but so Matt is one of our group who like play regularly on Monday nights in the rotation of 3 games that we've got going, and I believe has been in that rotation since the beginning.
Yeah.
So you play 3 characters regularly in our rotation then, don't you?
Yes. I play, in your game, I play the Wild Magic Sorcerer Silas, the living shitpost from Tumblr.
The Mr. Silas Nobody, yeah.
Yeah. I play Harrow Vimes, the blind wizard, and doing his best in Beth's game. And then I play Leatherhead, the always hungry croc man that occasionally can become a shark in Balance game.
Mm-hmm. That's not like a Sebek Car thing, though, the becoming a shark, though, is it? It's
No.
just he's a druid.
Yeah,
So
he is a druid. And actually, what's funny is that he's not actually a druid in this version of the game. His class type is called Kahuna, which is kind of great.
Oh yeah, because like obviously, Cerulean Seas makes a lot of changes to like how certain things work in Pathfinder, and also what a lot of things are called.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting in that like I like things that have to change so much because like it's clearly a new environment and it's like kind of like it's basically just Waterworld is what really it is. It's just like Waterworld happened and then everyone who can't breathe water is now basically dead. There are some areas of it that are like there are some areas of like the world that are above water, but like that's few and far between.
Like definitely, Cerulean Seas is rad. I just like really wish that Pathfinder were not as complicated as it is.
The upside of Pathfinder is that like you have like a million options, but like the downside is that you have a million options and none of them are explained very well until like you have to get through like some like actual like busy work in order to understand what the hell is going on.
Yeah, like you're definitely a big help when we play Pathfinder, but like that's the reason why I made Trick, because I was like, I want to play something really simple so that I don't get so frustrated by this system that I want to cry. So I'm going to play a barbarian who like does one thing, does it very simply, and has like a lot of passive abilities that make her just like ignore a lot of the bullshit that Pathfinder pulls. Like for instance, the barbarian like can't be caught flat-footed at all, so I don't have to worry about like that wrinkle in how armor class is calculated.
Yeah. Upon playing my first 5th edition game, like it because 5th edition definitely takes like a whole lot of different things that Pathfinder doesn't, and it's like, oh lordy, there sure is some learning curve here. Magic feels a lot more powerful in 5th edition. Like,
yeah, I think it was because like 5th edition, I think like in terms of feel cribs a lot from 2nd edition, but
yeah.
they didn't like the way that AD&D modeled magic. They liked having like a high magic system, because when you play like a wizard, I don't want to be this weird, useless guy with a dagger who occasionally casts a spell. Like, I want to be casting spells because that's why I played a wizard. They do a lot more with like cantrips and stuff.
Well,
And I really like the spell slot system.
I do like the new spell slot system. I don't like how parts of like the spell lists are just bad. Like necromancy isn't a thing. Like you have two spells that make undead and they aren't very good. And conjuration is severely nerfed as well. Like there's it used to be in Pathfinder and in 3.5 and even in somewhat 4th edition, which was a very strange edition. There was a spell called Summon Monster, which was you summoned a monster from a list, and it stayed for a little while and then poofed away. It was like the basic conjuration spell. It was your like magic missile. It was your whatever you want to do if you wanted to be like a wizard that summons things. Now you have like
Mm-hmm.
very high level spells. Like there's like a 5th level spell that only can create a CR6 creature, and that's it. And like you can do like below that, but like it's not very good. And also the creature becomes hostile to you once the spell's over, which is also not good. And
Mm.
it seems like an unnecessary addition.
It kind of makes sense in that in AD&D like a necromancer was not really a thing that you could be because AD&D subscribed to this idea that like necromancers as characters were always evil, so you basically had to convince the DM to let you be one. It's kind of like how 5th edition does that weird thing where the death cleric domain is only in the DMG,
Yeah.
so that the DM has control over whether you get to play one, and I don't know that I agree with that.
Well, like since 3rd edition and higher, and then Pathfinder does it too. There's always been like a death god that is also like there's been like the neutral evil death god, which is just I want to murder everybody, and like undead are cool in zombie apocalypse. Well, hey, but there's also been the neutral death god, which is like people need to die, and like that's not something to be scared of, but it should happen because that's how life works. And
I think it's quite an attractive dichotomy to have. Like I've even ended up doing it in Dawn Sombre as a setting. I mean, it's between Tanatha, the deity of the dead, who is the like neutral death god, is just like passage of life and death, and it likes undead, but it's not like undead should happen. It's just it's cool if they do. And then you have a Taramatsu who isn't a god but wants to be this like usurper demon lord in exile who is very much the evil god of tyranny and like undead flesh. As fascinating as that is, that's not actually what we like came to talk about. We were going to talk about you and your characters and the way that you, because I think like the reason we wanted to have you on the show is a while back. I want to say like a year ago or so, because like I just listened to this episode and it's likely because it turned up on like my Facebook memories or like Time Hop or something. That we were talking about like how there's like different ways of doing a character's character, and like there's a way that Maxi does it which involves a lot of backstory that like sews the character into the setting, and then there's a way that you tend to like to do it, which is that you start with a character with like a very 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 simplistic backstory, and then the character like builds character like based on the things that happen to him. And like neither of those is wrong, but I thought like we should like actually talk to you about that, because I believe like when you started in my game, all that we knew about Silas was why he was in prison.
So, a lot of the times whenever I play games, like I go for kind of a mix of things. Like if I know the setting well enough, then I'll be able to like create this long, intricate backstory that like has multiple like other characters and multiple other places. But like at the time, I didn't really know your setting very well, so I'm just like, okay, I'll just make this character, and then like I thought of his backstory, and so I guess I'll like tell the backstory here. Silas Nobody is a orphan from it's unclear whether or not his parents are actually dead. That is what he's been told. As far as Silas knows, his parents are
Yeah,
dead.
definitely. As far as he's not like actively looking for them or anything like that.
No,
And,
he actually Silas resents his parents, but that's a whole other thing. Silas is from the land of Varash, which is basically spooky, scary land, but also very cold land.
yeah, it's like gothic horror hell. It's like if you imagine Innistrad from Magic the Gathering, except it snows a lot, and also you know how in Innistrad nothing good ever happens, except
Yeah.
sometimes it does. That, except without the sometimes it does.
So Silas initially was a child with his parents, which I guess lived kind of normally. But then a hag was like, "Hey, let's give him chaos magic," and Silas promptly started doing things, and his parents were like, "Oh no, our child is a changeling now," because Silas was just reacting to things differently because he had this magic now, and he's like, "I don't know what's going on. I'm like 4. What do you want from me?" And they're like, "Oops!" They just like kind of gave him to an orphanage, or they exploded, and now he's in an orphanage. So we don't really know which one. Silas believes the first one. I think the second one is actually what happened. But
It seems more likely.
yeah. But and at the orphanage, his like magic was kind of low key until a couple instances where like he found out, and then like the Lord took him, and the Lord of the land, because at that point Varash was very much a kind of like medieval fiefdom almost. They had a king, but every lord kind of like had their own plot of land.
Well, no, because this is the thing, right? Is that like I want to talk a little bit about this later, like when you've like explained more of the story. But like Silas and other characters have done this as well, but like Silas quite a lot has shaped the way that certain details of the setting work. So from this point, I was like, okay, Matt wants Silas to have been like this weird like jester to a local lord. So I'd be like, okay, Varash has like a completely ineffective like constitutional noble system, as well as the crime families that like actually control the country.
Yeah,
So it's like they had the king, and under the king, who ostensibly still controls the country, there's the lords who have like regional castles but don't do anything and don't really govern at all. And then under that, you have like the orcish noble crime families who actually
do
control
things.
the land as it is and do
Yeah.
things. And most recently, all got turned into vampires.
So what ended up happening was Silas was with his lord. The lord did like while it was very very creepy, like that like the lord's like, this small child, I will take this one and let him be my entertainer. Like they found out he had magic, and they did this whole like kind of gaslighting thing with him because like they didn't want the crime families to realize that they had like a little mage running around. So like eventually Silas's magic, he rolled badly on the chaos magic table and exploded, killing the lord and most of the people there too. Because as like mechanically wise, a fireball is very deadly because
Mm-hmm.
8d6 hurts a lot when you have 12 hit points.
Absolutely.
So Silas somehow managed to survive this, but and he was shipped to jail, which was at the time apparently this anti like this like jail that like made magic difficult. And for a sorcerer like Silas, who like his like literally his blood is magical, it basically made him feel like he had stage 2 leukemia and he was awful. But which is why
Mm-hmm.
he was just so ready to get out of there. And all this was at a very like kind of formative age, so like he's like, what the hell is going on? Just get me out of here, please. And yeah, that was, and then that was where the rest of the characters found him, which was in jail, and then they all busted out together, and then the adventure began because we freed Sigrid, yeah, the rebel leader, and we all just kind of escaped to Isle of Bells. But at the time, I played Silas as just kind of loopy, but didn't quite understand what was going on outside of Varash because that was all he knew.
And I'm like, I'm sure there are like some listeners who'd be like, "Hey, you said that he didn't really have a lot of backstory. That seemed like Matt was talking for a long time." And it's like, well, A, he's like fleshing out the story now that there are like details that we know. Also, B, notice how he like comes into the prison with no prior attachments. Like everybody he previously interacted with is dead.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the point, is that it's only forward from here. Maxi, by comparison, in the arc that you're about to go into, has a massive number of connections.
Yeah, I heard that she was literally going to be like Belle in Beauty and the Beast and have like everyone know her.
Well, it's like there's like a whole load of people who would have known her as a kid.
Yeah.
And this is like the thing that you're going into, like the event is like a thing that's been going on for so long, and that like that Zell knows happens. It's one of her favorite times of year, and like her parents love it as well. and it's there's definitely going to be a lot of like exploration of Zell as a character in this arc, which is not to say that we don't do that for characters like Silas, and but I'm getting out of order.
Yeah.
One thing that I really like loved, that I saw you like do with Silas, is both Fallon and I noticed that it's easy to read Silas as autistic because he like has this kind of indignant view of the world around him and the way that it's supposed to work, and he finds a lot of kindred spirits in beings that like make it their business to buck the normal trends of how the world is supposed to operate.
One of Silas's defining traits is that he is mostly a sorcerer, but he has like a single level of paladin, and he is a paladin of specifically Vesisark, the goddess of chaos. And
a concept he was introduced to the first time you guys went to Tarn.
Yeah, the first time we went to Tarn, and he was just ecstatic because he didn't have a word for the way he felt, and he couldn't really put a solid like label to what he wanted and what he believed the world should be like. And turns out when he like talked to the priests of Vesisark, and he's like, "Oh, this is what I want." Also, Vesisark is like aesthetics wise constantly surrounded by a like riot of color and like often mutations, and Silas aesthetic wise stems by looking at and perceiving and often creating riots of color. Like he does not like to color in lines, and he doesn't like to like he resents any kind of rule or law that limits what he wants to do.
Yeah, he definitely abhors like stricture,
which is like funny because like from a certain point of view, I understand like kind of his view is that he's realized how powerful he is as a sorcerer, like just by virtue of being a sorcerer as opposed to someone who cannot cast spells, and he's like why should your rules apply to me in any way? I don't really want them to. And then he realizes like, oh, there's actually nothing you can do to stop me except for fight me, which I'm very good at fighting, and that's it. So, like, if you are powerful enough to make me obey you, well, okay, you win. But if you're not, then there's no reason for me to. So he kind of has, like, this, like, it's almost like Star Wars Sith aesthetic of, like, the strong should rule, and then, like, everyone else has to obey them. But at the same time, he wants nothing to do with any kind of rule whatsoever. And, he didn't really have a word for what he wanted, and then he like looked at Vesisark. He's like, "Oh, that," which like is really funny because ever since he did, he's been trying to impress Vesisark and like trying to like get her to notice him, and like the most he's ever gotten was kind of like just like left on red. Like that's the most he's ever gotten.
Well, I mean, like. Her answer to his prayer, I literally cribbed from the Wikipedia article for the non-committal answer that you get from a Magic 8 Ball.
Yeah, I noticed. But, which is, like, to be fair, I absolutely dig, like, Silas just, like, his praying just by shaking Magic 8 Ball and seeing what it is.
I think there'll definitely, like, be more interaction with Vesisark as...
Well, especially as we get to Tarn, which is, like, has an actual temple to her.
It's true, but I think like once you started like leaning into that, when you were like, okay, sure, I'll lean into this idea of like Silas as autistic, because I was mentioning that like all of the characters obviously, but like Silas in particular have like shaped aspects of the setting. So obviously it was easier to do like I suppose in BioWare fandom we'd call them loyalty missions for like characters with established backstories. But when it came time to do one for Silas, you folks had just been blasted into the astral plane by the sort of like secondary villain of the campaign.
Yeah.
Who basically like noticed that the primary villain was following you, and it was like, great, if she follows them, she won't like pay attention to what I'm doing, which she will not like. So I want these kids to just go and like run away from her, and she will follow them. That'll be fine.
Not near me.
And then like they keep trying to find him. They try and find Mercius, and he's like, "Fuck off." this is the opposite of what I wanted. And so he like blasts them into the astral plane, and they find passage into the Feywild. And I was like, okay, so there's like two things we want to achieve here. I want to do like an arc in the Feywild and like have fun with the Feywild. I also want Silas to find the hag who like gave him his powers.
I have to admit, like, I love how you did it too. Like, I love how I love how like you had Silas's hag mom basically just be so quiet and dignified and like.
So like here's the thing, right? I was saying, because I keep getting to this point of like Silas has affected the. So when you were like, okay, I'm gonna come down like on the canon side of Silas is autistic, I'm like, okay, I don't want like Fey touched characters to be changelings then, because that, you know, there's like the theory that like the concept of like fairy changelings comes from like medieval parents watching
like
autistic children.
yeah, they're like this ordinary child suddenly went crazy. You're like, no,
Yeah, and it's
that's
like,
actually
no,
just how this works.
yeah, that's just that your child is growing up. That's, and it's just manifesting their behavior in ways you don't expect. So I was like, okay, I don't want them to actually be changelings. I want it to be clear that like Silas and all of the other Fey touched are the actual children that they started as, but they've been like modified by
Like, to be honest, it's less that like that their behavior has been altered. It's more like they've been given mutant powers, and that's just basically it.
Well, this is the thing. I wanted it to be like Fey touched are more likely to be autistic, but we don't know whether that's because the Fey like touching autistic children more, or whether it's like there's some sort of correlation between the two.
Well, like
And
the first thing I wanted to make sure of when like I decided that like yeah, you know what, Silas is going to be autistic, is that just fits everything I've been giving him so far. So I wanted to make sure that like the fact that he was autistic was completely separate from like his other abnormal behavior and from his like powers. That like those were a separate issue. He was just born in this way, then given powers.
that's a very sensible idea, and also a very gracious one that I thank you for.
Well,
Like
like
from a character perspective, because I think definitely there would have been, if you decided to make those connected, there would have been the potential for that to like veer into like kind of gross territory that neither I nor Fallon would have thanked you for.
like
But
granted the powers don't help his autism. Like they are certainly not helping him, but that's by virtue of just having an additional hurdle to go through.
yeah, well, this is the thing, right? He's like it I think it was
Like
not
this,
even that I wanted that to be like a thing. I was like, it's cool that Matt is playing Silas as autistic, and also because of like comments that, you know, actually autistic members of the group have made about the way that he plays Silas normally. I don't want that to be like stemming from the fact that he like derives his sorcerer's powers from being like this child who was touched by fairies.
which is why I'm like, well, because the decision to make him autistic was like completely separate, and before we even knew that his like I had a vague idea that his powers came from the Fae, but like
Yeah, I think like the first time you heard of that was
was actually at the Isle of Bells.
right. Yeah, that's when you found out that it was the Fae.
And he's like, oh,
And
well,
then
I'm connected to them
and
some
then
way.
it was way later when you found out that it was a hag, because I think
Yeah. Marin.
yeah, Merrin the Sea Witch was like, I think it was a hag who did this to you, and that was like the first inkling that you get. So there were a lot of fun things to do with the Feywild, and I think I may have talked about some of them on the show before. But basically, I wanted my Feywild to be distinct from the Feywild that Beth had already displayed in Two Earth, which was this very I want to say psychosexual experience, but in a way that like is sort of,
Like, it wasn't gross.
no, not really. And at times when it wasn't like indulgently gross. It was like, no, this is supposed to be gross.
Yeah. Which is important thing. Like,
Yeah,
it's fine to have like grossness in your game, so long as you like don't try to play it off as like, no, this is actually okay. Like, no, this is gross. This is supposed to be gross, and like that's just what
yeah,
happens.
yeah. So I think like it's the kind of like psychosexual Feywild that you'd expect to see in like Shakespeare and like Irish folk tales.
Honestly, honestly, it did feel like exactly like every single Gaelic myth I've ever heard ever, and like it's exactly what I expected.
That like the Fey folk are like partying all the time, and she had like the different seasonal courts and stuff like that. And I was like, this is really cool. I don't want my Feywild to just be that.
Yeah, your Feywild feels a lot more like White Wolf's Feywild actually, of like the Changeling, the Lost kind of Feywild, where it's like,
I've actually never played Changing the Lost, so I don't know what their like fairyland is like.
well, to be fair, their fairyland is very much built on concepts rather than like basically their fairyland is made of stories, and like everything has to have a story to it, and it's very strange and very psychedelic and not explained because the players are never supposed to be there, which I
Right.
mean is fine. So like, which is why yours feels less like less whimsical than
Yeah,
Beth's
except
was.
also like the way I templated it was that it's supposed to like feel like a dream.
Yeah, and dreams are
So
not
there
always
are
fun.
so there are like some aspects, like for instance the bramble, which is their
Yeah,
like.
I love the bramble.
So like the way I wanted the Feywild to work is in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and they've done this for like a couple of editions. They have this idea that the Feywild and the Shadowfell are both like reflections of the material plane. So it's like they're sort of like warped versions of stuff that you might like, which is great for like alternate universe fiction. Like I read like a lot of YA lit that like imagines a different adjacent London, for instance, and it's like for dimensions, that's a really cool idea that makes absolutely no fucking sense whatsoever. It's like, what happens if on the material plane they like build a new city? Do like new
Actually,
cities like appear on the Shadowfell and the Feywild? What
actually,
happens?
the way they explain this is that the Feywild is based on if the humans were never, if sentient races were never there. So it's like this like primal wild place, whereas like the whole point of the Shadowfell is like it's supposed to be the reflection of when entropy has basically taken away everything. It's just this big ruined place that no one really likes.
Right, but I didn't like that because I'm like that makes the Feywild a like
A reflection on like
a reflection on the material plane, which canonically in the setting makes no sense because the Feywild as a like a place is older than the material plane and is like the way thaumaturgy, the way like the non-old magic works that like sorcerers and bards and wizards and whatever get all their magic from is that it's like endemic to the material plane because it spills over from the divine planes and from the Feywild and the Shadowfell into. So it would be like. So the first thing I was like is that in the Feywild, you what was the exact ruling that I gave on how magic was different?
um when
I'll see
it's
if I can like look it up.
oh, was that like every single time roll for the wild magic table? Like roll
No,
to see if you did the magic
it
table.
was like everybody is a wild magic sorcerer. So
Yeah.
whenever you like cast a spell of cantrip level or higher, you roll a d20, and if you roll a 1, right?
Yeah, if you roll a
Then
one, then like roll on the table.
but also like you get more spell slots or you regain your spell slots on a short rest or something like that.
Yeah, you like it was like yeah, no, it was like you gained it on a short rest because you would just like be taking in the magic much faster, much longer.
The idea being that like imagine how easy and yet how out of control igniting like a match is in like an environment that is like
Constantly like
it is like pure propane, for instance.
yeah.
You're just like you're never gonna have this problem of like getting fuel, but also like you light a match and just the whole thing blows up.
But like I actually really loved the how like it's really easy just me to say like, oh, Silas just acts like a Fae, but he doesn't. Like the Fae, it made the Fae seem very alien, which I really liked.
Oh yeah,
Um,
so like other things, other ways that the Feywild works is I actually like did away with the concept of the Feywild having Cartesian three-dimensional space to begin. Well, it does because it has like three spatial dimensions that you can move through whilst traveling forward through the fourth dimension. Although it doesn't match up exactly with the one on the material plane, so like time was paused while they were there. But places move around a lot. So what they have is this system called the Bramble, which is imagine flu powder from Harry Potter, except
But it murders you.
well, yeah, imagine like flu powder, except Harry Potter like burns to death in the Weasley's fireplace and is then reconstituted out of ash at the other end. Like the bramble just like smashes your body to pieces, and then you just like grow out of a tree at the other end of your. And people use the bramble because otherwise they're like, I have no idea where I'm going because everywhere keeps moving around.
Yeah.
And then there's like hags who in the Feywild are Fey witches because I like the idea that like hags only look like hags in the material plane because they don't have access to like the overflowing magic of the Feywild. So they look like, creepy old women in the material plane, but in the Feywild they look like Idina Menzel. I mean, I'm trying to think of like older women, but not like like just middle aged generally.
Well, like
and they have like weird deformities.
Yeah, in witchcraft, there's this the rule of three, which is maiden, mother, crone, and so
Right.
like they're in the mother stage, and
Right,
like
yes.
and then
Exactly.
like when they go to the material plane, they're crones,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
I actually super dig that. Like that's really cool. But
Yeah. And they like tended to come in through, but they all had like these weird deformities. Like for instance, I'm trying to think of like 'cause they
one
were
was
all
like had
Irish,
a
right?
heart-shaped head, and like
Oh, yeah, she had a heart-shaped head because like from her nose upwards, she had like two tops of her head.
yeah,
Like one that went to the left and one that went to the right. So she had like four eyes in total and like two scalps, which like became this heart-shaped head. And they were all. I was like, the Feywild is aggressively Irish as a concept. Like a lot
yeah,
of the like myths and stuff of it come from Ireland. So everybody here has an Irish name and speaks with an Irish accent,
yeah.
which was fun to do like on the sessions where I could actually do it. Other times maybe not so much. But it was that you met was it Aoife the like satyr, and then there
Yeah.
was Even, Dorveen, and
Vidra or something like that.
no Maeve
Yeah,
because
they all had the
it was
Eve sound.
yeah, but specifically the BH
Yeah,
Eve sound. I think no, not the BH, which is not as popular as like other ways of making the same sound. But that was their like route, and they. I guess fast forward because like the point is we're supposed to be talking about like Matt and Matt's characters rather than me talking about the Feywild. But eventually,
when Silas like eventually is put on the trail of his of the hag that like touched him,
yeah,
and like he gets there, and the way you like built this up is exactly like meeting a Dark Souls character, actually.
right. So
Um,
I already had like an image in my head of what Siobhan looks like, and my idea for Siobhan is she's like this giant like 10 foot tall woman in a shawl, and then like down her front she just has like hundreds of pairs of human arms. Like I don't even think she has legs. I think she's like a sort of
there's more arm.
arm centipede type thing.
Yeah,
But as a design, I love that. But I think it was because I'd been like playing through Dark Souls like on and off stream at the time, and I'm like, this is a really really like Dark Souls ass idea. And I think because I'd also got it into my head that she would like speak like very slowly and quietly and calmly, a lot like Blue Diamond from Steven Universe.
yeah.
I told you when you meet like Silas's like Fey mum, she's gonna be like a Dark Souls character, and then like when she first turned up, you were like, yeah, you said she was gonna be a Dark Souls character. I didn't realize you meant a Dark Souls boss.
Yeah, it was really funny.
But like, I liked. I like the idea of Siobhan being like super chill and like caring for Silas a lot, just because so many bad things happen to Silas.
Well, like, what's funny is that, like, a lot of bad things happen to Silas, but he just will not ever acknowledge them ever.
Well, this
That
is like the
has
major, like we talked about this like a year ago. That the major difference between Silas and Harrow is that like both of them do stupid things, but Harrow constantly faces consequences for his actions, whereas Silas never faces consequences for his actions.
like what's funny is that the idea of someone caring for him unconditionally is so utterly alien to Silas that he's just like,
Mm.
well, this does not compute. What are you doing? Or at the same time, he's really really grateful and happy that his Fey mom exists until she goes like, oh hey, the person Silas admires and holds as this is what society wants to have happen is oh, by the way, if Silas ever gets severely hurt or dies, they have a random chance to explode.
Yeah, Silas was not happy about it. So like, Siobhan gave everybody like a gift, like everybody in Silas's group, just for like being like friends with her weird like mortal godson. And the gift that she gave to Zell was that when you all got like cast into the astral plane, Venatus, who is a character from like Zell's
Her backstory.
extensive backstory, yeah, was with you, and Maxie had been making Zell like brood constantly about this because it's like Venatus didn't come with you into the astral plane, so presumably he was still like being tortured in a bubble of old magic that him being an elf would probably kill him. And so she was like, she got a vision from Ranred that showed that like time was stopped while they were in the Feywild, and then Siobhan just like reaches into this like scrying pool and pulls Venatus out of it, and is like, well, that's your gift, but if you want to make like a Fey pact, which is because I wanted to get like a Fey pact in at some point, because like in all of these myths about the Fey, it's like, oh, and they make like tricksy deals with mortals.
Yeah.
But I was like, but on the other hand, I don't want this to be like the normal mythical kind of Fey pact, which is kind of like a monkey's paw situation, because like as players, you know that trope, so you would not like fall into it. So I made it that like Siobhan promises to heal Venatus, like heal all the damage that being in like a bubble of old magic did to him, which like gave him this like horrendous like skin complaint and nearly killed him, as well as healing. I don't know if Ezel actually realized that this was part of the deal, but healing the damage that that Caius the Lich did to him, where he like
Yeah.
Fucked up his shoulder and basically gave him scoliosis. But in return, Zell has to like watch Silas, who Siobhan really, really cares for, and like keep him out of danger. Well, not even keep him out of danger, but make sure he's okay. And Silas is like, A, don't make Fey pacts, and B, don't make Fey pacts when the condition is something that you don't have control over. I might randomly explode one day.
Well, the thing is that Silas himself can't control it either, and
No.
also coming from Varash, Silas do not make pacts with Fae. Do not make pacts with Fae. My God, don't make pacts with Fae.
Except presumably Silas also has like some amount of exposure to the Kirk, who are like, at some point you're going to have to enter into an agreement with some being of great power. It might be a demon or a fae or a god or something to keep you safe.
Yeah, to be fair, that's because Silas feels like he's made a pact with Bessasar, so he's like, okay. And so far, Bessasar has asked.
Yeah. And also, he would know that like Zell has made a pact with Ranaret, because Zell is literally a paladin. So the idea of like entering into such a pact for somebody else's protection.
The other characters have voiced their opinions of Silas to him multiple times, and he usually laughs them off, but he does take those opinions to heart.
I think
when
the
people
general
go
consensus is we all love Silas, but he makes bad decisions a lot of the time.
yeah, but when people call him crazy, he goes well, I'm crazy, so I don't have to think about my actions. I'm just crazy, and we're like, no, Silas, that's not how that works.
No.
Also, have some agency to yourself.
I think quite a lot of Silas's story has been about agency. Like some of it's about identity, but I think a lot of it is about Silas claiming the agency that he never had.
Yeah, which is why he's making the decisions that he does. He just worships Vesisark with literally every action he does.
Mm-hmm.
I've so far now, whenever we've left a city, Silas has done a little art project, and he like we started in the Elven Empire and continued by doing so in the desert place. I can't
Oh,
remember the name.
Relend. All
Yeah,
right. So what's this?
and
I
like
presumed that you were talking about the masks, but evidently this is something else.
no, this is the graffiti he
Oh,
does.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's.
like the graffiti that don't actually make sense, but at the same time, like are actual like anarchic views. But
But like weirdly like undirected.
yeah, because Silas is like opposed to the very idea of law itself, as
I think
opposed
he's
to
kind of
like
opposed to
a
like all
specific.
hierarchies, to be honest.
Yeah, he's like, no, absolutely not.
Like even because this is the thing about when you become a paladin, you have to like swear an oath, and your
It was
oath
so
is like a
good.
big part of the paladin in the player's handbook as written. Vesisark's oath ends with you like swearing never to bind yourself to like oaths or contracts to other beings, and then right at the end you like denounce the oath that you just took because it's like
Yeah,
this is
which
really
is
sort of like a pledge of intent rather than any sort of binding like agreement because Vesisark
which is
doesn't
why
believe in
like
that sort of thing.
which is funny because like Silas is just constantly want to destroy this if this isn't
Or at the
okay.
very least like shit
And
stir here.
yeah, that and like Silas does try to stir up chaos and change wherever he goes, but it's like it's not out of like some like supervillain esque things like I want to spread chaos to the world. It's more like I feel like this is how things should be, and people will be happier. Human beings require structure in their lives. That's just how we have evolved as a
And
species.
Silas
So I
is
was like,
like,
LOL,
I'm
can't
not
hear
gonna
you.
get rid of all of it. I'm just gonna like put
He's
some
like,
weird like anarchist graffiti on this wall.
well,
Gonna like stir the pot a bit.
through the magic of risk analysis, he's learned that he's like, attempting to murder the God King will be bad, so I should not do that.
Mm.
Like, he wanted to do so, simply because he's like, God King? God King? What is this nonsense? Get this out of here.
I mean,
But, like,
being that the god monarchs are like actual like superpowered beings, he probably would not have succeeded. But definitely, I believe he expressed like an intent to try something like that, and other characters were like,
yeah.
please don't.
Yeah. But, Silas does have his, like, special interest in masks, which, I started off initially just because like I thought it would be cool, but it's like it actually ends up being a core part of his character, and that like Silas compartmentalizes a lot of his personality into like this is like making a mask that represents parts of
Mm.
him, and
I had some like great fun with that in the Feywild, where it could be like weird magic shit can just happen, and we had this scene where like Silas gets out like a bunch of his masks representing like different aspects of his personality, and then they just sort of like hover and like communicate with him as he has this sort of like introspective moment about whether he's upset Zell. I think
and
that's
like
what that was about anyway.
yeah, like I love that like Silas, and for the most part, like when he comes to like trying to interact with another person, he will absolutely be introspective, and he's surprisingly thoughtful at times, which is like there was this moment after Silas he kills a ton of guards, they all pile on him, he thunder waves again and murders them all, and he's like, oh shit.
Yeah, like they were not expecting
Well,
that
I
to
mean,
happen because neither the guards nor I, as the DM, knew that Silas like had a feature where because like they pile on him in like a not even a rugby scrum. Like I don't even know like a sport where you would pile on like this.
but like it's actually more like just like what a police
Yeah,
maneuver.
basically. And then like one of them like closest to the bottom of the pile just like claps a hand over his mouth and like pins his arms. And Silas is like, haha, I don't need either of those things to cast a spell. So I'm gonna cast Thunderwave and make you all like fly away.
It's because this is why I love the meta magic things in this thing.
Meta magic is really good.
Well, there's a reason it's the sorcerer's like own like besides their like blood abilities, like they're so in tune with their magic as opposed to like someone who had to learn it or gain it from an eldritch being. Whereas like he's like, I'm just a magic person, I can just do this.
Yeah.
But So Zell used first of all, the ring that Zell had is apparently powerfully lawful, and when Silas picked up, it was as if Gandalf had picked up the One Ring and is like, "No, do not touch me." And Silas like, "Well, okay then."
Specifically, Essa's ring, because I presume you're talking about Essa's ring, right?
Yes,
Essa's ring
yes.
does not like chaotic people. So So that's why it
No.
hated Silas and it hated Jay and it hated Mary. I think it went around everyone until it got to Zell, who is not lawful but is at least like neutral good. And it was like, this is probably
Yeah,
the best I'm gonna get, and just like fused itself to Zell's finger.
and then like she,
Mm.
which is like this 8th level spell that's like,
Right, yeah, because the way that the spell
and
works is that it belonged to Essa the Enchantress, who's like this like human folk hero, and you like
but
fuse
yeah,
like
and like
Dragon Ball Z or even Steven Universe style with the spirit of Essa and turn into this like 18th level like spellcaster, and you just bang,
yeah.
away you go.
So what ends up happening is that Zell is just conked out, like she's just done on the ground, and like Zell and like Marion and Jay like start smoking weed,
Oh yeah.
and like, and then Silas is like, she's unconscious and she just saved our lives. I'm going to put her in the recovery position and make sure that she doesn't like swallow
Mm.
her tongue or something, because like Silas is oddly thoughtful at
Well, I
times.
mean, like
Well,
Silas
because like
has.
he's not
This is the thing. Like Silas is a very
like he's
chaotic being, but he cares about people to a certain extent.
well, he cares about four, like three or
Mm.
four people. Like he has a limit to how many people he can care about at one time. This is just something he imposes on himself because he's like, this is too many people. Like I'll never be able to help them
Yeah.
all. So like I'll limit myself to
Definitely
these
like
four. And
Silas's limited like outwardly expressed concern for other people or things was a big problem for Restorex, the Deep Dragon, who is
yeah,
like a tertiary villain who's like really annoyed that like the party keep fucking up his plans. So in Urbig Navali, he was like, I'll possess Jay's half sister Octavia and turn her into this like criminal mastermind, all as like a way of setting up my revenge on this group of people. And it was like, I think Marion, he blew up her, yeah, he
her
blew up
ship
her
blew
boat,
up.
and Jay, I can't remember what he did to Jay. Oh, Jay obviously was
Like he her
Octavia. It was like, I've turned your sister into this like evil being against her will.
like
Yeah,
evil
evil
criminal.
criminal. And Silas, he was like, what the fuck do I do? And so eventually he was like, okay, I'll have Octavia cut off one of his ears because he likes to wear masks, I guess, and then he won't be able to anymore because he doesn't have like a thing to strap them to. Which was like the best he could come up with. It was not good.
Silas does like he initially felt like he was going to go chaotic evil eventually, just because he just gave so few shits about the lives of
Mm.
other people. But like he's slowly like gaining appreciation for things, and he honestly does believe his like anarchic like message is actually good for
Mm.
people. So like he believes that like, oh, if you live under like the rule of law, then like I have to come help you.
I mean, there's
And
two
like
entire like religious institutions devoted to Silas's goddess who also believe that he's not alone in that conviction.
yeah, like and I do kind of want him to meet them again and
Mm.
just like return to just, like return to the temple of SSR. He'd just go like, look at all the things I've done, and like
But I think that was when Silas first found out about the thing where devotees of Vesisark start mutating. Like, they gain weird mutations, especially when injured. Like, they heal back in weird ways.
and like which is why like Silas now has this like vaguely masochistic thing going where like he doesn't really mind getting hurt because he knows something cool happens
Yeah.
afterward. So like he's less inclined to like be sad if he gets like injured in any way or like attempt to stop it because he's like he'll attempt to do it because he doesn't like pain, but he's like, well, okay, I'm injured, I guess that's not so bad because like now I have this like cool thing's gonna happen, especially because like he like he like I love the kind of aesthetic we're going is like this like feathered serpent like because he's got like scales and feathers and like
Well, it's like a random thing each time, right? So I think he's got like feathers growing out of his like cheekbones and like a patch of scales somewhere.
yeah
And
He's got like 2 patches of scales and now like eyeballs
Oh
coming out of
yeah,
his
that one's
shoulder.
really gross. Actually, I don't like thinking about that one, but it's kind of it's a cool like thing.
Yeah, like, and now like he's got like a tattoo up his left arm with like tattoo of
Hmm.
like eyes and like a deep like what I think is really fun and enjoyable to play Silas is that he does morally questionable things, but at the same time he means well and is trying to do what he believes is the right thing. So he feels less of like the Joker and kind of more like
Hmm.
Harley Quinn.
I could talk about like Silas for ages, to be honest, but you you do play other characters, and we should maybe like talk about them. So in Beth's game, you initially do you want to like briefly talk about what's his face, the failure, Darius, right?
What I was going to have to do is I was going to try out playing a warlock, and um, and the whole point of Darius is that like he had made a pact with this like snake lady in order to gain magic because he was from a family of mages and he just was shit at
Right.
magic and he couldn't do anything. So he wanted magic. He wanted to so that he could like best his
Mm.
sister and be like the ruler of the family himself all the time. And he had a purely selfish reason for doing things, and he was just kind of a bad person. As I found out, warlocks suck ass in fifth edition. At least they didn't have enough like little things that like in fifth edition. There wasn't enough unique things to do, but like the invocations were cool, but they were too little, too late oftentimes because the only cool ones you have so little spells to do. But like they balance it out with like you're supposed to like gain all your spell slots back at a short rest. The problem is short rests take an hour in game, or
It depends
like
on
it's
your
just
DMs. Like
the
I
problem
think
is that
I,
yeah, the thing is that you will run out of spell slots in the middle of a fight and then just be useless.
I don't know that we need to like talk extensively about warlocks because we did actually do like a class study episode on the warlock, and there's like Beth and I go through all of the invocations talking about which ones suck ass and which ones are actually kind of good, and the like pros and cons of giving the warlock the most powerful cantrip in the entire game.
Well, the new warlock things are really cool and really creative and are super good.
Oh wait, did they do UA for the warlock?
Oh yeah, they have like 5.
Oh cool. I knew they did one for the ranger, but I didn't actually know that there was one for the warlock. I should probably check that out.
Well, one of the ones that I'm currently playing is them with a sword, and it's actually like super good because like it's focused in that like it's a dueling thing. Like you curse one opponent and then they're just done. But like it has this like cool like Raven Queen like spooky like fey flavor to it. It's clear that like the UA like the I don't know if they're kind of warlocks are trying to move away from the pact with the devil kind of thing and into like pact with just beings in general and
Yeah.
then just do things. Whereas initially I was pact the fiend and Darius was just awful. And Darius like I talked to Beth about it and like there wasn't really a way to like actually make Darius playable and also like he was just not fun as a character because I couldn't really do much to make him unique and I like making unique characters. But eventually he dies from a helmed
Yeah.
horror just murdering him, which is funny because a helmed horror is actually like was just a strict answer to him because he was immune to both fire and force, and that was his only damaging spells. So technically, it just hard answered him and just murdered him.
Yes, all right. So the reason for bringing up Darius is to point out that like Matt's current character in Beth's game did not like start
No, he did not.
the campaign with us.
But
But like, let's talk about Harrow, who I think is actually like, a much more interesting character than Darius.
oh yeah, way more. Um, Harrow is a lawyer slash like law clerk, and and he's a wizard, specifically an evocation based one. And so they're like, he's particularly good at like blowing things up. Let's like use him as that.
I do like that this implies that like Harrow takes the like CSI School of Law Enforcement
Yeah,
part, where he
he
just like
absolutely does.
is all branches of law enforcement as needed by the plot.
Which is funny because like people do constantly point out that like Harrow like this isn't your jurisdiction. You can't actually do this. And it was like no, the law needs to.
We need to catch the guy first, and then we put him in court, and then you come in and do your thing.
Well, like Harrow does have a degree in like police work, so he can potentially do that, but like what his actual job is to be a lawyer.
How did we meet him? I remember there was a zone of truth involved.
You were needed because you could cast Zone of Truth, and then Harrow was like Harrow was the lawyer that was doing it, and then you needed him again because of like a hag problem that like we needed to talk about, and then like Harrow became blind because his fire magic and his magic ended up being too powerful for him to control, and he blew out his eyes. Like they are currently just like this reddened mess with like burnt flesh kind of around them. Like they've gotten better. Like they've gotten better over
No,
time.
they haven't. You like mentioned that like part of the reason why even 2 years in you do a lot of light-hearted blind jokes with.
No, as in like appearance wise.
Oh yeah, okay, but that's got better.
Like they're not gross and like oozing anymore, but they are still very like red and not
But
happy
it's like Harrow was partially sighted for a while, which is why.
for him because he's like, I know I'm going to be blind, and there's like no way for me to like actually stop it.
Yeah, not like heels. You fucking blew
Not
your own
like
eyes out, you
like
idiot.
not like you don't have eyes right now. Well, like you have eyes, but they're like burnt mess, so you can't really actually touch them. So like that doesn't help. And he knew his eyes were going to go eventually, and like he was in kind of denial. He was like hoping it would get better, and then like he woke up one day and he was completely blind, and like he had a bit of a Darth Vader moment of just like shit, I'm blind now. I'm like really angry, and they just blew up. He just like thunder waves and blows up his room, but his mom just kind of walks by like just grow up and get to work and just kind of slams the door. Yeah, his mom's horrible, but he eventually like goes back to work. He's learned Braille. He's learned like to like kind of like be able to be aware of his surroundings, but still not like he's not able to go. The Force is with me, and I'm one with the Force, and just kind of fight off stormtroopers. But like
So I don't. I'm sure because there's gonna be like somebody listening to this podcast who's like a lawyer who's blind but had and I've only just realized that myself. I don't actually know like how much of an influence Daredevil is on Harrow as a character, if any.
actually like he doesn't have superhuman vision or senses. Actually be objecting to Daredevil's ways in that like he doesn't believe in vigilante justice. Ironically, considering he was just part of vigilante justice, but well, initially he was just like, no, vigilante justice doesn't work. You have to do everything by the book because that's how law works, and like he believes that law is important. But upon meeting the other characters, upon going through adventures with them, and upon like seeing like how like the law is often abused, he's grown from lawful neutral to lawful good, and he's like, okay, yeah, vigilante justice is okay, but like
Sometimes.
yeah, but like in certain circumstances, it's a case by case basis. It's almost if like it's almost as if humans are flawed, and therefore like the law can be abused. So like he would prefer it if it doesn't, but that's just sometimes happens. You have to deal with it. But currently Harrow is just doing his best to try to help everybody, which is not good because Harrow's wants to help everyone, and it's very difficult because like helping everyone often means helping no one because no like reaching a compromise is very difficult. Like it's been like Beth has actually said that she loves that like Harrow cares so much about like everything, which means it's really easy to motivate him to do things. Like whereas like Silas like cares about three people, and then that's just hard stop, we're done. Harrow cares about every single person he meets, and therefore like personally invested in helping every single person he can, which like is like almost like comically like it feels like very like DC Marvel superhero ish like level of thing, but like it's also very naive. Like Harrow has this naive hope that he can help everybody and justice can prevail, when it's like, well, the real world doesn't work that way. So like he has to compromise his unflinching views with how reality works.
It's real funny because like we were talking about this a little while ago. Is that like Harrow is one of the like I think he's like pretty much the only member of the party in Beth's game who Azriel like consistently likes. Like Azriel had a great time being in a wrestling tag team with Coslin, and occasionally Azriel like will team up with Volanthe to go and do a thing. Sometimes like Azriel will get lumped with Volanthe if they meet like, you know, racists who don't like nomads or elves or whatever. But I feel like the way that I justified this, I like for a while I was just like Azriel likes Harrow the best, because I liked putting like a nicer spin on the like slapstick that you would do with Harrow at the expense of the blind. I say at the expense, like I don't know that it was ever like mean natured, but like at times it, especially since he's ostensibly been like partially sighted for 2 years, it felt kind of cruel to like just leave it hanging as a bit. So I would start having Azriel be like Azriel like helps Harrow consistently, like being like, no, this way, like come on, buddy. Azriel considers Harrow's access needs a lot, and then I was like, all right, why does Azriel like Harrow when he doesn't seem to care about anybody else? And I think like what I eventually came up with is Azriel believes that Harrow's concern for other people is naive but ultimately commendable, and he doesn't like how like the rest of the group's bullshit often happens at Harrow's expense.
Harrow was given like a can of dog food, and he was like unaware that it was a can of dog food, and like he was like, "Oh, this kind of tastes weird, but I guess it's fine," and just like and then just like and then Azrael was just so bad that someone just gave this guy a can of dog food, and like
Yeah, Azriel's like, please do not like abuse my blind friend. What the fuck?
Harrow has a lot of internalized ableism to himself, mostly because of his mother. He is like worth less than a lot of other people solely because of just the way he was. His mom was just like you can't really get mad. You did this to yourself. So like if people like people like act weirdly about you, you have only yourself to blame. So like Harrow kind of internalized that. Some parts of like how he's blind, so he like kind of plays it up to like make people laugh at him, so that like because that's how he views like that's how he gets friends is like making people laugh.
Yeah.
And he like a lot of the times there's like if I need help someone getting me to a place, it's more that like he just kind of wants someone near him so he can hold their hand as opposed to like actually needing help.
But I think like definitely Azriel like views Harrow as being this like unfairly victim. It's weird that like a lot of this presumably comes from Harrow's mother, which Azriel doesn't really like remember or care about. But he's like views Harrow as like this unfairly victimized, comparatively, member of the group, and will like stick up for him a lot of the time. I really like the thing that Azriel and Harrow have going on. To be honest, Harrow is good, and I like that we all have like interactions with Harrow that like work.
Yeah, I really do love it. I actually personally enjoy the fact that Harrow, much more than Silas, has a lot more. Ironically enough, has a lot more agency to him.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. It's like the you know heavily disabled character has more agency, but like he does.
Whenever something bad is happening and someone says someone ought to do something, they tend to never like follow that through with and that someone is me. Whereas Harrow is like, if something's going wrong, I'm going to try to do it because I have like this power to do so, and it's my responsibility to try to help. And like he's very much from the Spider-Man view of like, with great power comes great responsibility. So like he's like, I have the responsibility to use that power to help others because I believe that like we all got to stick together and help each other in this cruel, cruel world that like mantis people exist in. So he's like, well, like I might as well try. But one of the things that actually like defines Harrow as a person is that like Harrow is very empathetic and loving. Like he cares so deeply about all these other people and just wants to help so much. Whereas like Silas is just like vaguely disgusted with the idea of someone like caring that deeply for him with like no like asking nothing in return. He's like, what are you plotting? Like, why are you doing this?
And it's really funny because like on the surface, like you can look at these two characters and be like, oh, they are very similar characters. They're like these like lol random comedy characters with like fixations on like fire magic and like a general like being kicked by the universe type thing, but they're
Actually,
actually like incredibly different.
what's funny is that Harrow is actually pyrophobic now.
I mean, he probably has every right to be honest.
Like he has an intense phobia of fire. Like, it's fine if he is casting the spell because one, he knows that he's like, well, I've already burnt my eyes out. There's not a whole lot more it can do to me. But also that like he's learned now that he has the ability to sculpt the spell so he can like make sure it doesn't hurt him. But like when it's close to him, like he is like just put into a panic mode because now he can't see the fire and he's like, oh no, where is it? What was super funny is that when Harrow is embarrassed or flustered, he not only blushes but actually emits steam because of his fire magic. He tries not to get super angry. Unfortunately, things have been happening that have made him super angry all of the time. Like one of the things that like defines Harrow right now is that like he's super angry at how such a shit hand of life that has dealt all of his friends of like Coslin just being like put in through this horrible childhood and this horrible experiences. Azrael having his dead sister just brought back to try to torment him,
And like desecrated.
and like Valanth being put into like a war that she didn't want to be in. So he's like, why are all these horrible things happening?
Yeah, and like, why is nobody doing anything about it? I should do something about it because apparently, like, nobody else is going to.
What he's super mad about is that like when the gods talk to him, he's like, these people were murdered unjustly. What were you doing to stop it?
I love the scene that you did where like non, because this is the thing. Is like Silas has that thing where he like has one level in Paladin. Harrow has no religious connection at all. He just dialed a god. Like,
Yeah,
what even is the spell called?
it's called Contact
Right.
Other
So he
Plane.
just like dialed into a divine plane oh what was the god who he contacted?
The god of knowledge, the centipede guy.
Um
And like I thought was funny is that like Harrow believe well, he was fine with that god because he's like, you're neutral, you have no like leanings good or evil, so it makes sense that you stay out of things. But this lady is trying to turn into this horrible mantis and bring back the Mantis Empire. Like he's like 5'8" or something like that. He's really tiny. Like why is this small blind wizard the only one who's just like, guys, what are you doing? And like um Harrow does kind of feel like his actions kind of motivate the rest of the party. We need to stop this. Everyone's like, yeah, sure, that's probably a good idea. And like that's less so now because now the threat has affected everybody. So now that everyone's like, yeah, we need to stop this now. But Harrow just in general is just super he's very much into like the social justice thing, but like the joke is that like you can't call him a social justice warrior because
right.
he's a
Yeah,
social
that's the
justice
joke.
mage.
But it's like, but no, he genuinely does care about like achieving like justice for like people who have been wronged. And I feel like this is like the thing that one of the reasons why Azrael likes him is that Azrael thinks that that's like incredibly naive and misguided, but also like commendable that he like makes a genuine effort at trying to realize it as a dream. And Azrael thinks it's unfair that he's being punished not only by like the world but by other people for
Well,
trying to do that.
that's that. Like, let me put into that Silas does stupid decisions, and he comes out of it with like some minor wounds and then nothing else. When Harrow makes a dumb decision, like people get hurt, he gets severely hurt, and he's like has to live with the consequences all the
Well, this is
time.
the thing as well, is that Azrael like 100% sympathizes with the idea of experiencing like terrible consequences for your poor decisions. Because I mean, who was it who like slept with Maribel in the hope of getting leverage? And as it turned out, she was only pretending to be a fascist, and it doesn't work.
It even comes down to like how Harrow and Silas lost their virginity, which was
Oh,
hilarious.
right, yeah. This is. I kind of hate to talk about Silas's one like again because I know we've already talked about it on the podcast once, and it was really embarrassing for me because it was only afterwards that I realized that like actually thematically when you like look at it in a vacuum, that was not an okay scene to do.
He does not take a lot of like agency to himself, but
Yeah,
like
I guess they were both drunk, so it's not like one of them was taking advantage of the other, but still.
yeah, it's not that creepy. Like granted, one was much older than the other, so she probably should have known better. But like, whereas like way Harrow lost his virginity was like both of them were like consenting and aware of it, and like, well, it's because like Harrow takes the reins of his own destiny, and that's just how he does things. Whereas like and now Harrow has a thing for monster girls, and it turns out that's been thrown at him constantly.
Well, I
So
mean, Harrow and oh Christ, I've forgotten her name.
Willow.
Willow, right? Willow, the I want to say Dryad. Are they like still a thing? Because like Willow is just sort of hanging around on the material plane at the moment.
Well, like they apparently they're in like an open relationship, but like they
Hmm.
care very deeply for each other, and like whenever they can, they do talk to each other. Like specifically for things that are like different and unusual to him. And he's like, "Oh wow, this is
I can
cool."
kind of imagine that if he like gets more agency, Silas would probably develop a similar kind of thing. I can definitely see Silas having like a new experiences type. Um,
Yeah. Well, like Silas doesn't actually feel like Silas's preferences would be like pretty strange. Like he doesn't strictly look for like. Actually, I have no idea what Silas would look for because like
this is the thing,
the
right? Is like Silas because a lot of Silas's as opposed to Harrow's story like revolves around him not having a huge amount of agency, especially the first time he does a
yeah
thing. But then like starting to build on that, like Silas had that experience and has I want to say since no wait is since correct? I don't remember why you went to the no you were no so this has been like actually like since then but like Silas had like this the crush on Merrin which he was like was going nowhere but before that he got hit on at the garden party
yeah
because Silas has like a ridiculously high charisma score and is very pretty but doesn't know what to do with like advances from other people but I feel like he's like improving on that now.
yeah like he would like now he would absolutely know what to do
I
and
feel
like
like if he were put into that situation at the garden party again, like even if he didn't know what to do, he would know what was happening. He would know
yeah
why this one
yeah
was talking to him.
that was really funny. He's like, what's going on? Help! But I do like that Harrow has a lot of Harrow's just a general like warm like loving person that like he just takes care of people even when like they really kind of don't deserve it. Like there was a moment where Eleanor was very drunk and like was making advances towards him and like he was absolutely down with it, but he's like, "Wait, you're shit faced. Like
Hmm.
this seems not okay." Like to the point where like Harrow respects other people's agency too, and he's like, Harrow is a good boy. He's just a good boy, and he's just very like fun to play because he is like, despite being like a 5'8" blind boy with like not actually that much muscle mass, he has the moral code of a superhero. Like he feels like he has like Superman's sort of
Yeah,
moral
like
code.
he, Harrow is a good boy. We all love Harrow. I think this is the
Yeah.
thing, right? I don't think like anybody in the party in Beth's game dislikes Harrow. Like there are like rivalries that run across the party at times, but like I don't think anybody dislikes Harrow at all.
Well, it's because, well, to be fair, like Harrow gets himself involved in like helping other people, and he's like Harrow is also very much willing to talk about his feelings and talk about how other people feel and like solve conflicts just by talking them out. And that like, okay, like when you do this, it makes me feel this way, and I know that's probably not how you meant it, but like let's talk about how we can like adjust this. Harry's very much like a counselor kind of
Mm.
person, whereas like Silas is like, yes, conflict, let's go.
But I like that like even Eleanor, who like is often like constantly exasperated with the actions of mostly Asriel, let's put that out there. Like other party members as well occasionally, but
Yeah,
mostly Asriel. But I imagine her like in the Chamber of Secrets when they like first come back with the car and Molly Weasley is like screaming her head off at them and then she just like turns to Harry and she's like, oh, it's so nice to see you, dear.
Yeah.
And like Eleanor just like
But
is yelling at Asriel like, what the fuck were you doing, like sleeping with like the fascist demagogue. And Asriel was like, I thought I had like a plan, but it turns out she's just wants to turn herself into a mantis lady, so the plan didn't work. But no, and Eleanor was just like, Harrow, dude, you've done nothing wrong.
Harrow did nothing wrong. But
I feel like I don't know that there's a huge amount to say because of the three games, like Fallon's game is still like quite young. But do you want to talk about Leatherhead?
oh, I absolutely do because I actually have like a complex backstory for Leatherhead.
Oh wow! I know there's like some of it because like Leatherhead is a Sebek Ka, right? So he's like a crocodile man, like a very Egyptian inspired like crocodile guy.
But so Sebek Ka are a very warlike, imperialistic race, like and very rigidly hierarchy, and like they have their god king Sebek, which is a literal god who is also the god of them and is also their king. And they've been told that their destiny is to take over the world. And like for the most part, Sebeka have a racial ability called Blood Rage, which is basically they go into a barbarian rage when they are injured or when they smell blood. So in the army, like in their military corps, they have this like kind of like gross self mutilation like thing. Like they view that their enemies aren't people, so you can eat them now. Like literally, they're just meat that you can just wreck apart now. And like Leatherhead is a defector from the army because he's like, wow, we just massacred women and children. Like, this ain't okay. And he brings it up to his CO, and his CO's like, what are you doing? Get back to eating. Like, stop. Like, we have no room for, like, sentiments here like this. This is the army, damn it. And he's like, welp, I'm outie. So he escapes, and he still has a lot of PTSD of involving the army, which is, like, not helping because the Sebeka fight aboleths all the time. Sebeka have another racial ability called like reptilian mind, which is like anytime they have to make a will save, they can roll twice and take the better result. At any time they can make a will save, so that's super good, particularly against aboleths that are all like psychic based. So like they can just rip them to pieces. And also, they're all melee based, whereas aboleths are kind of like squishy and melee, but they're just a race of big like fish wizards. So the aboleths are like, no, we need to kill them. So like when we met the aboleth in that like plot line, like that was when he first turned into a shark, and he's just like, nope, we gotta kill him, gotta go. So like in like he reminds me of like the clones from Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and that like he's a good person, but he is absolutely programmed for war, and like he's only now slowly learning his way out of it. So right now he is like a druid, so he kind of has this deep south kind of aesthetic he's got going, in like a direct opposition of the strict hierarchy of the army that he used to be in. So he's like, no, I'm just gonna have like my underwater banjo and like my like palm leaf hat, and then just let's go. So yeah, Leatherhead is a ton of fun.
Well, that's cool. I don't because this is the thing is like obviously as the DM in my game, I have to interact with Silas a lot, and as we've established, like Asriel likes Harrow and likes spending time with him. Trick like has I think a working relationship with Leatherhead.
Yeah,
like they're both big, right?
Yeah, that's
But Trick is largely like, hey Leatherhead, get rid of these bodies.
I do love the moment of just like feeding it into like a paper shredder. Just like,
Yes, please, Crocodile Man, remove evidence, make things easier.
but like which is actually kind of why like while I do enjoy playing like Leatherhead, I don't have the same investment that I have in like Harrow and Silas.
I kind of feel like that's because like Fallon's game is still young and there's quite a lot of stuff that like hasn't come to fruition yet, so there's not been as much opportunity to explore any of the characters.
Yeah, then like we haven't had like any like missions that have any like like we haven't yet, at least. I know that this is probably coming because this is something that Fallon enjoys and that most of us enjoy, like missions that let us like show our characters'
Hmm.
values. Whereas like most of the time we've just been fighting Ableth and their minions, which are all generally like if you're not evil aligned, you can get behind just
Yeah,
murdering.
but
So
also that's
like
been like something that's been very focused on um,
yeah,
Maxi's character specifically, and
yeah,
Kia's a bit, I guess.
yeah,
Like
because both of them have been victimized by the
right.
Ableths in the
Whereas
past.
it's more difficult for us because like Leatherhead's story involves a lot of things that are happening very far away. Trick has basically no story whatsoever outside Bippo. So like Trick and Bippo sort of I feel like Trick is definitely gonna like Fallon is gonna have to like craft something for Trick the way I like crafted stuff for Silas. Like just watch what comes out of
Yeah,
her as a character as the campaign goes on, and then like run into like some character development because it's like Trick. I've tried to do some stuff with Trick, but it's more difficult to like roleplay heavily when you're like struggling so much with the system. But I have enjoyed like suggesting that Trick is self conscious about her like large everything because Karkanak are like based on fiddler crabs, so normally they have the you have the female Karkanak who have like 1d4 claws, and then you have the male ones who have like one. No, I think it's the female ones have 1d6 claws, and then the male ones have like one 1d8 claw and one 1d4 one. But you can take a feat called Craw Daddy, which upgrades both of your claws to like huge 1d8 ones.
yeah,
So I got this idea that like Trick is very self conscious about her giant hands
yeah. Which is like
because it's
which makes sense.
yeah. It's like trying to pick things because a lot of Trick is not a deep character. Trick is a like giant socialist crab mum who says things in a silly voice. That's her character. So I have to sort of like pick character development where I can find it, and there was a joke. There was a joke where Kia's character like gave a like cult leader a hand job,
Yeah,
but but like over a over the gap between two sessions. So we made this joke that like Kia had been giving this cult leader this hand job for 3 weeks, and then later on when it came like time to actually fight this guy in front of his congregation. I don't remember the exact wording that I made her use, but like Trick made this joke where it's like, I also can give you a hand job, but it might be sharper and less enjoyable. And I think like definitely, like obviously, Leatherhead has more like backstory, but I think at the moment that's where the two of us are at, is that we just sort of add flavor currently to something that's still very much other characters'
I mean,
story.
quite literally flavor to like with in Leatherhead's case, because like he just
It's true.
eats everything. Like it's gotten to the
Yeah.
point where like we've actually had a moment where like, no, don't eat the corpse. There's actual loot on there, and he just kind of has to like open his mouth and just like let Shemazri kind of like become a pilot fish and just kind of like search through his mouth and find the loot.
No, it's this is the thing, right? It's frustrating to me that like I'm so confused by Pathfinder as a system because I genuinely enjoy Fallon's game and I like
Yeah,
playing
it's
Trick
super fun
because
because it's such a cool setting to like just be
it is.
underwater
It's
all
a
the time.
fantastically cool setting, and I love Trick as a character because despite how like basic she is, she's kind. I like playing kind characters. Like I want to talk about Seraphina in like the context of Silas in a minute, but it's weird, right? Because like I play Azrael, who is like a very acerbic character, but I like the like chinks in the armor when Azrael gets to be kind, especially to Harrow. Like I really value the relationship those two characters have, because I think that's just where I am in my life right now. Like I've been playing D&D for like 5 years. I like playing kind characters.
Like it is fun to just be like the like just the good person and like well because like it's like I have to like I'll admit like playing Silas, Silas is not a good person. Like
Yeah,
he has good moments, but at heart he is mostly just a chaotic boy. But and like to be fair, he does just kind of remind me of like a 4chan
Mm.
image board that's sprung to life, complete with terrible spelling.
But like one of the like the less garbage 4chan image boards, like CK maybe. He's not B. Okay.
No, he's not. He's like he's more like just shitty memes. Just like
So S4S maybe.
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, he's not the straight worst, but he's like unpredictable and tiresome at times.
Like to be honest, like I've had like glimpses of like deeper moments of Silas, but like the joke is that time no other character is around to witness it. So it's funny to so there's like Silas doesn't really share his more like vulnerable moments with practically anyone except nowadays Zell actually. Zell is more than often than not around Silas, so she does witness him like being not just this loud shouty boy, but also like introspective and often more scared. Like Silas is a very fear-based character. Like he's scared of being controlled, so he violently reacts against it. He's like scared of all these other things, and he's just like, nope, got to get more powerful so I don't have to be scared. So like, and then he masks it by just being completely LOL random all the time. Like, what's funny is that like the moment
Mm.
after like we make a deal, like Zell makes a deal with like Faye mom make 100 hands to like have Silas not get hurt a lot. The very next like thing we do is this Royal Rumble where like Silas gets gunpowder and like
Fucking concusses himself because he's an idiot.
yeah, he tries to rocket jump. It doesn't work. He goes forward and just smacks himself.
Mm.
Like the funny
I'm
thing
actually
is
like really proud of all of you in like the Royal Rumble arc because whilst I'm really fucking mad because I just listened to like the first posted live Adventure Zone session, and I'm like, fucking Griffin fucking McElroy did a way better D&D wrestling pay-per-view than I did. But I am like really proud of you guys and like how
well, like Silas absolutely was into it. Like it sounds like the kind of like event that Silas would greatly enjoy. It's loud and brash, and like no one actually knows what they're doing, and so it's like, let's
and
go.
it's all like I mean it's based on like actual professional wrestling, so it's a ridiculous cartoon, which sounds like exactly Silas's jam.
Also, like one quick tangent here is that like whenever I make a character that casts spells, I always like try to imagine like a unique, at least unique aesthetic to how they cast their magic, and
Mm-hmm.
like have like Harrow's magic since he's a law mage be like he would make like ruins and draconic like around his hand, like the Doctor Strange kind of thing, and like
Mm.
actually cast the spell and have the spell just say what it does in draconic around his hand. Like Fireball Lily will cast spell out Fireball and cast it. Whereas
Mm.
like when Silas casts his magic, it's like just the psychedelic on drugs kind of thing happening, and it's like this ridiculously over the top cartoon nonsense that just happens whenever he casts his magic.
Mm-hmm.
So like just this over the top cartoon is just Silas's aesthetic. Let's go.
Absolutely, but I think I was like kind of worried that like um with the exception of Maxie, who like loves pro wrestling like I do, and it was killing Maxie that like she knew that it was not in character for Zell to be into it, so
Yeah.
she had to pretend to be like just unimpressed by this entire production, and she's like, no, the thing I love. um, but I was kind of worried that like the rest of you would not quite get it, and I think actually like you all like latched on to stuff that was like I loved how Fallon latched onto like making whenever Marion came out after Rev, because Rev's entrance involved like using nature magic to make it rain inside the arena. It made the ramp all wet, and so like Marion would just like skate down this like the runoff from that like into the ring. I'm like, it's cool. You do that all the time. This is exactly the thing. Is like your entrance is the same.
And like when I thought of, okay, so the reason why I went with like Silas's ring aesthetic was to be a clown and like be like creepy circus guy, and like because like Mirage Arcana is just basically the spell that lets you over a certain amount of like space control, like basically have this illusion that controls everything in that space, that like none of it's actually substantial in any way, but like you can just project an illusion over this cube, and like the cube was just enough to be like enough for the arena, and like he had this whole thing of like the way he changed was like he would be in like the magician's box and like out would pop out the other person, and like I was super into it, and because there was a wrestler that I remember called Doink the Clown.
I vaguely remember that Doink the Clown existed. I think Vince McMahon might prefer that you didn't.
Because I remember watching it on pay-per-view and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And it was the strangest thing. And that and like Silas pretending to be this like over the top clown is not at all pretending in any way. It's just like this is what Silas would do regularly, which is funny because like I remember that you when like this first entrance is that like he made this huge like paper mache bomb just explode in confetti, and he just like appears out of it and just cackling. And you're like, oh no, not the gobbledygooker.
Fucking gobbledygooker.
And I watched the thing of like what that is, and they're like, what's in the egg? What's in the egg? And like
it was so bad.
They were so upset because it was such a build-up.
Yeah, it's like they like had it on stage on Raw for weeks, and then it was just like, oh, it's like I can't remember which Guerrero it was. It was one of the Guerreros, just in like a dollar store turkey costume. But no, I loved when you did that because I was like, oh no, oh no, it's the Goldie.
To be honest, Silas in like a dollar store outfit of like a clown is exactly the aesthetic.
By the way, apropos of nothing, when you said if I can go on a quick tangent for a moment, I was like, so you've listened to the show.
I have. I've actually listened to every episode.
Oh wow, fantastic! That's great. We should probably wrap this up.
Oh yeah.
Alright, so who knows whether this episode will ever see the light of day, because we had a major technical issue, and I'm gonna have to see if we can do some recovery stuff. But I suppose if you're listening to it, I succeeded.
Audacity, please.
Yeah. So I don't. This is like the weird thing about having guests on the show is that like Beth and I usually sign off and we're like, this is where you can find us. Do you want people being able to like contact you about stuff that they heard on the show, or?
Absolutely sure. Why not? Let's see if I can. You can find me on Discord probably at Super Nerd Matt Wants to Battle. I don't remember what my number is.
You can find me at Cleaver Crumish on Twitter and Tumblr, and also on Twitch. Yes, so the music was by Kevin MacLeod. I have a vague idea of what the background images behind the text would be, but depending on length, this might be 2 episodes, in which case they will be down in the description, the credit for the images. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Presumably not Matt, but Beth and I, hopefully, will see you all on the next episode, whenever that will be. So bye-bye.
See ya.